Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Learning from the Pros. Joining me today is Tara Robertson. She is the Director of Growth Marketing at ContactMonkey. Welcome, Tara.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So Tara is talking today about her 10 tips on how you can leverage the voice of customer in your marketing campaigns. I just wanted to quickly start off by defining what is the voice of customer in your eyes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you can take it in a lot of directions, and we'll get into obviously those 10 tips. But for me, it's really just having that customer voice top of mind every time you decide to do something. So whether it's should I invest in this channel? What words should I use on this page? But always trying to have that customer mindset of like, will this actually mean something to my customer and not just to our marketing team, which can be tough to get out of that headspace of things that you like or your VP likes.
Yeah, and I think this topic is so relevant for today in a world of AI. Because in my mind, it's like that's the one thing AI cannot replace, right? The voice of your customer, it can amplify it and stuff like that. But not to get too on a rabbit hole there, let's kick off with the
Yeah.
first tip.
Sure. Yeah. So my first tip, and I feel like this has been such a cliche in the B2B space, but it's really top of mind for me just because I just started my new role a month and a half ago. And that's just talking to your customers, spending time with your customers whenever you can. Part of my obviously joining a new company, got to write my 30, 60, 90-day goals. And one thing that I always try to do in that first couple of weeks when things aren't too crazy yet in a new role is just scheduling chats with customers and prospects where I can. So that's really why this whole topic was top of mind for me, the voice of customer, because I've already
Hmm.
gotten some really interesting insights just from a few of those just Zoom chats that I've had with people in the last couple of weeks.
I'm curious when you're going about that process of like, okay, I want to schedule time with my customers, get to know them, etc. How are you thinking about who to reach out to?
That's a great question. So for me, I'm lucky because the space I joined is there's a lot of overlap with the marketing connections that I already have. So we sell to IC folks, so internal comms professionals, but there's a lot of overlap where a lot of marketing teams kind of end up with that on their plate, even if that isn't necessarily their focus. So for
Hmm.
me, I my first week, I literally just posted on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, does anyone own internal comms? I'd love to chat, and I'll buy you a coffee." Just like very soft offer, like no sales pitch. And I got about a dozen people responding to
Wow.
me through that, which was very generous of people. But obviously, if you are joining a brand new industry, you don't have the connections, you could always reach out cold. I feel like people are usually more willing to talk than you would expect.
Hmm.
And if that's not an option, I would definitely start with spending time with your CS team or your account managers, whoever spends the most time with your customers, and seeing if you could even just shadow their calls, even if you don't feel comfortable booking those yourself. Shadowing, or yeah, that can be super helpful too.
Yeah, I love that. What is I mean, I wanted to ask a clarifying question on that, but I'm not sure if it's a
Mhm.
tip, which is around the questions you ask during these calls.
Oh, good question. Yeah, I didn't even think
Yeah,
about getting that deep.
I'm curious, like just like unpacking it for the viewers, right? So it's like you're reaching out to your customers. I love the LinkedIn tip. That's gold, for everyone listening. Like if you can post on LinkedIn and that also could I mean, the intention is not to like sell, right? It's to learn, but that could lead to something too, which is great, like a relationship, right? And at the end of the
Mhm.
day, the more relationships you have in the space, the more opportunities, which is great. But when you are on these calls, like what are the kind of things that you're looking out for and asking?
Yeah, I would say the biggest things for me as someone on the growth side of marketing is I really wanted to identify new channels and just content formats that our audience would be interested in. But at the same time, it's always important to me to ask, especially again, you don't want to do too much of a bait and switch and sell. But one of the people I ended up speaking to was actually an open opportunity with us already. So it just happened that she made the time to chat with me, which is very nice. So for people like that are in your sales funnel, I always ask, was there something that sparked you looking into a solution like this? Or did you have kind of that pain point? What was that aha moment for you? Because that's the kind of insight that you can go back to your marketing team, and that can really inform other programs as well.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I always remind myself whenever I'm confused or I'm not sure of like how to proceed is your customer is the marketing genius. And
Mm-hmm.
really like our job is to be almost like the transcriber, and we like just sit next to them and we try to transcribe their genius into some
Mm-hmm.
campaign to kind of like reiterate to them. That's kind of the frame that I take. So I think that makes perfect sense. And on the product research side of things for everyone listening, because the other thing someone watching this right now might be thinking is like, how many calls is enough calls? And
Mm.
like, when do you know you did enough calls? And like, in my experience, like having previously been in a product role where I had to, ask a lot of customers questions, is once it starts to get boring, then
Mm.
your customers pretty well and like you've done enough of them. Where like they start to say the same things and you start to
Mm.
feel like there's less value in every call in terms of like the unique insights you get. You have a huge product gap or like customer product feedback gap when you get on calls and you're constantly hearing new things. Once you get to the
Mm.
point where you're like
Yeah.
consistently like hearing the same stuff, you're just like, okay, I got this. Let me go into the lab, cook something up, right? And like kind of bring it out to the market. So just for everyone listening, if that question did pop up in your mind, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those projects that I personally don't think it's ever done. But like you said, once it kind of gets repetitive or boring, maybe it's time for you to be like, okay, I have enough insights. I'm going to move on, but maybe check in 3 months or set some kind of cadence for yourself to check in again.
Yeah. All right. So tip number one is spend time with your customers. What's the second tip, Tara?
Sure. So my second tip is wherever you can to use real customer results on your landing pages. So this is actually something that we tested, I want to say almost 2 years ago at Chili Piper. It was a little while ago now. But it was one of the most successful tests we did on our book a demo page, which obviously super important page for any B2B company. And we actually tested using, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was something around 48% more meetings booked was the stat.
What?
And we tested that stat. Sorry, that was the copy, not the results, but that was
Oh,
the
okay, okay,
copy.
okay. So
I
I was like,
I wish that was the result.
what?
It's a little meta because we sold something that books you more demos, but I want to say it was 48% ish. And we tested that versus what we had been using for years was double your meetings booked with Chili
Hmm.
Piper. So we tested using a very specific number that we got from a real customer. And obviously, it's not quite as great as double, but I think having that super specific number where you can, for whatever reason, seems to get people's attention more. I think it just seems more real to a lot of people, especially marketers can kind of,
Yeah,
you can kind of sniff out when stuff feels a little too rounded number, like too perfect.
yeah.
Like double maybe was too perfect of a number for some people. So,
It's like everyone says that double, triple,
hmm.
X. It's like
Yeah,
after a
exactly.
certain point, it just becomes repetitive, right?
Hmm.
I love that. It's believable. I mean, I think that nails it, right? For us, for example, on the AdConversion website, we've been running a lot of tests on like improving our conversion rates throughout our funnel. So for us, it's like on the education side of the business, it's basically visit to free student sign up, then from the free student sign up to a community activation. That's kind of like our system right now. And for the longest time, our impression to free student sign up was like 2% site wide, but
Hmm.
2%, which is like low. I mean, we're giving away free courses. Like
Yeah,
it's not like
for
we're
free.
asking for a demo or something. And anywho, what we did was we added a tracker of like the amount of active students in the academy, and it dynamically updates. So like you can always
I
see a
saw
real
that.
time
Yeah.
amount of like how many students we have in our database. And that was nice because it actually lifted the conversion rates and it was dynamic
Hmm.
too. So it was more believable and people were like, oh, like there's actually something to it. So I totally resonate with what you're saying around that. Was there any other ways that you guys incorporated real customer results?
Yeah, actually, this wasn't a customer, but it was kind of the same thing that you're speaking to. We did a similar test with our newsletter at Chili Piper, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but again, we had a rounded number, like join 15K plus marketers on our list, or we tested that versus like 14,889 or whatever the actual number of subscriber was, and we didn't have
Hmm.
it dynamically update, but it was just a real number. Like I just pulled it once a month and we would update, but that definitely gets people's attention again more than that super nice rounded 15K number.
I love that. Like there's something to just being real. I was listening
Mm.
to this interview with the founder of Lush Cosmetics.
Mm.
I like whenever I go into like side note about me, like whenever I go into like a store or a brand that just like catches my attention, I like to research the founders. And it's so interesting because like their YouTube videos have like no views, but like this person built like a nine-figure company, you know what I mean? And no one knows who they
Really? I've
are.
never seen their
Yeah.
YouTube. That's funny. I want to look for it. Yeah.
It's like just them on like these super old interviews that they've been on throughout the
Mm.
years,
Hmm.
and they just like drop these like insights. And anyways, with him specifically,
Hmm.
One of the questions he got was, he's like, oh, I can't afford, well, the person was asking him, he's like, I can't afford organic products. It's too expensive right now. Like, we can't go
Hmm.
fully organic. We still need some synthetic because of XYZ and the margins. How should I approach this? And his advice to the person asking him the question was, be honest. Tell them this is 75% organic, 25%, synthetic.
Mm.
And the reason why is because we're not able to go fully organic yet. But with your contributions and your help, like this is where we want to get to. Like just like that realness, that authenticness, you know what I mean? That just resonates so much more with the customer
Hmm.
and builds so much more brand loyalty over time.
Yeah, I fully believe that, especially for that kind of customer, because it's people that are doing their research, I bet. So
Yeah,
you can't really
totally.
trick them as much.
For sure. All right, tip number 3.
Sure. So, tip number 3, this is a super simple one, but there's a lot of free or very low cost tools that can help you start to collect testimonials if this is a newer area for you and you don't have a lot of customer proof or testimonials. So, yeah, there's a bunch. One we used at Chili Piper that I'm looking at reusing here is testimonial.io. But there's a ton in that space, like very affordable. There's some that can let you do video capture, there's some that are just copy, and it just gives you a good baseline to just start collecting those testimonials.
So like just to unpack that, like why use this versus like a Google form or something like that?
Good question. So this gives you a way to surface them up as well. So it's not just collecting them, but it also you're displaying them on a decent looking, like it's not the prettiest always if it's a free tool, but a decent looking landing page that you can link directly to. So for example,
Mm,
at Chili Pepper, we just gave that to our sales team to sort through whenever they asked for a testimonial or social proof. We just made sure they knew where that page was all the time. They knew how to filter it. And we would just constantly be updating that with new content.
nice. So you can like build a wall of love essentially.
Yeah, exactly. A social proof wall, wall of love, whatever you want to, yeah, whatever you want to call it.
So
Yeah.
now, so you send the link to your prospects or your
Hmm.
customers, and then they can submit a text testimonial or video testimonial, and then this basically allows you to aggregate social proof at scale.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can also add in an automated reward system with a lot of these tools too. So you could say, if you submit a video, you'll get, I don't know, a coffee gift card. But if you submit just a text review, maybe you'll get something smaller and you can really incentivize depending on what type of content you need.
That's so cool. We use testimonial that I think it's IO, the same one,
Hmm.
at AdConversion, and we have it embedded
Cool.
in our
Nice.
courses. So like
Yeah.
whenever, like at the end of every lesson, we always say like, if you found value from the course, all we ask
Mm.
is you like this video, share it with a friend, and leave us a testimonial. And that's like kind of the ask of the free courses. And like
Nice.
in the LMS, we have these testimonial buttons. And then what we want to do in the future is we want to track like how many people are actually clicking through the buttons. You know what I mean? What's the click-through rate look
Hmm.
like in terms of like, because then now you can like gamify it a bit on the product side. So like for everyone listening, imagine in your SaaS apps, like you can embed these tools into
Hmm.
your product, and now it can just like gamify social proof collection at scale, which is so cool, you know?
Yeah.
All right, I'm nerding out.
That's no, that's really cool that you have it in app. But that actually that's a good transition because my next tip was when and where to collect testimonials because I
Hmm.
think that's one thing that marketers, at least I used to be a little bit hesitant of like when do I want to bug someone for something if they're already a paying customer, for example, like when do I want to ask for something else? So
Yeah.
obviously an app is a really solid one. They're already seeing value, so it's perfect time to reach out. We also used to do automated, pretty simple emails just in HubSpot, but based on if someone gave us a high NPS score, you can obviously automate that again with a tool like testimonial.io. You could have your CSMs ask around renewal time if it makes sense to. And one thing, I know a lot of B2B companies used to do these pretty expensive campaigns with G2 where they would
Mm.
get those for you. So that's one thing you could do, but we started just collecting our own with these kind of cheaper tools, putting some money behind it with the gift card incentive.
I'm curious, like I think you touched on a prevalent topic around like aggregating your own social
Mhm.
proof versus leveraging these third-party sites. I'm curious, what's your stance?
Yeah, I mean, if you have budget to do both, I don't know that many teams that have that much budget right now, but it depends on your stage. Yeah, if you have budget to do both, that's great. I would say one thing that you can definitely do if you already have an active G2 page is you can also aggregate those existing reviews onto your site or onto a tool like testimonial.io. You can actually, what we would do is just honestly just copy and paste them over, or you can integrate depending on the tools you're using. But I would just, if you are paying for a tool like G2 that collects those reviews for you, make sure you're not just, we'll get into this in a little bit, but make sure you're using them in other channels and you're not just letting them sit in G2 because
Mhm.
yeah, G2 is great for search. It can help you rank, but a lot of buyers aren't looking at those sites necessarily to make a decision anymore. So you have to take that content and use it elsewhere.
Yeah. And for everyone like listening around the effectiveness of like when you make the ask, I'm just curious, like in your experience, what does it typically look like in terms of like conversion rates of, you make these many asks and then you get X feedback back. I'm not sure if like in that specific, but like just to frame people's minds of like, I sent out a broadcast to 1,000 customers and I only got like 5 replies, or maybe that's a symptom of a
Yeah, I
greater
wish I
problem.
had a benchmark. Honestly, we didn't do them enough to have solid benchmarks. We would kind of
Hmm.
do it sporadically. So I don't have a great benchmark, to be totally honest. And it also depends on what incentives you're using.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And I think too for like everyone listening, if you maybe that it's actually a deeper problem, because if they're not
Mhm.
happy enough, like it could actually be a good indication too of how much do they actually find value in your product, right? And then now you
Mm.
can use collecting a testimonial as like a symptom of sorting out and predicting future churn, you know? Like for context, like with us on the agency side, like our goal is to get a testimonial in the first 90 days after the QBR. And it's like,
Mm.
if we're not able to collect a testimonial or case study after the first QBR, we failed. It's like we didn't do a
Mm.
good enough job at like delivering enough value to substantiate that ask. But yeah,
So it could be an early kind of red flag potentially for your
exactly.
CSMs or yeah, that's a really good point.
Totally. Yeah. All right. Tip number 5.
All right, tip number 5. So my next one is pretty simple, but if you're using any call recordings on your sales team, so Gong, Clary, there's a bunch of different tools in the space, definitely take the time to set up some custom alerts and reports. It's super straightforward to do, but a lot of marketing teams just, in my experience, don't take advantage of it. So one thing that we did at Chili Piper is we would set up alerts with specific keywords, and some of them are kind of funny, but we would have alerts on things like awesome or I love this or this is great. And then it would ping whoever you can send an email to yourself, the whole marketing team, whatever you want to set up. And then you could pull testimonials directly from Gong. You don't necessarily have to use them as is, but we actually experimented with pulling some call recordings right from Gong and running those as LinkedIn retargeting ads. So super low,
Wow.
not fancy at all. But sometimes those can perform super well because they're just an unexpected format.
I love that so much. That's such a cool tip. Like, so it's like people are in the call. So you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
basically find like what are expressions people would say that would
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah.
like flag that they're having a positive experience. And then you're taking
Yeah.
it a step further and you're like actually taking a clip and then running it as an ad.
Yeah, so you don't have to go that far with it, but that was one thing that we thought
Yeah.
we really saw success with. And then the other kind of the flip side is it obviously you could use it for things like red flags with customers if you have those negative keyword lists. But one thing that we're actually trying right now in my new role is we're testing out some new homepage copy. And our founder had this idea that we should try using the word chaos or chaotic on the homepage just because times are a little weird right now and we were trying to figure out what
Hmm.
word to use to describe that succinctly. And a lot of the time employees are looking to their people teams, their HR teams for kind of clarity or just even consistency. So we were trying to figure out
Mm.
how can we say like, hey, things are chaotic right now. We can help. So I actually set up an alert for when a customer or prospect mentioned. Oh, and also when you set up these alerts for Gong, you can make sure that you set it up so that it's just the customer who says these things, not your sales reps, because that can really throw off your alerts too. So I would definitely take a second and make sure you do that. But if I set one up for if a customer or prospect mentions the word chaos in a call or chaotic, and it's really interesting to see the chart in the last
Really?
couple of months. Yeah.
That's such a cool insight.
So you can
Yeah.
keep your eye on trends too.
And now you're like seeing how the messaging resonates and like, yeah, I love that. That's really cool. All right. We are on tip number 6.
All right, number 6. So this is another kind of lo-fi-ish type test. But I would say whenever you can, if you have permission, try to use customers instead of stock photos, especially on channels like LinkedIn, because people can just smell a stock photo a mile away, I feel like. And just one quick example I wanted to share at a previous role before my time at Chili Piper, we actually sold to college professors. And we tried so many different varieties of stock photos. We even took some with our employees. We did a bunch of different things to try to make them look less stock photo-y.
Hmm.
But our best performing ad, and it honestly kind of drove us crazy, was this really not well lit. It was a really horrible picture of a professor, but it was a scene that everybody recognized, I guess. But it was a professor standing in front of an auditorium, and it was a projector was kind of like half on him, so he was in the shadow, and it was
Oh,
just like
like the
not a
face.
nice, yeah, it was just not a great picture, but you could tell like, oh, that's a real professor, that's a real person.
Hmm.
So something about that, I guess, just resonated. And that was our best performing. We kept trying to beat it with new creative, and that was our best performing ad for ages. And it was
I
kind of
love
annoying,
that.
but yeah, we couldn't top it with anything nice, which was unfortunate. But I just
That's
think, yeah,
so
people
cool.
like to see themselves in that kind of
Hmm.
thing. Especially, we were also, it was Facebook was our biggest channel, interestingly enough, there, because we were selling to slightly older demographic. They aren't on LinkedIn as much because they, if you know anything about being a professor, a lot of them have a job for life, basically. So they have their headline on LinkedIn and they have no reason to go back. They're
Yeah.
not, it's not like marketers that are looking for a new role every 6 months. So very
Yeah.
different scene. But yeah, so I would just say try to just make it recognizable to your audience or your customers wherever you can
Yeah.
using real people.
I love that. Great tip. All right. Tip number 7.
Number 7. So number 7 is all about in-person dinners and events. So we did a ton of events at Chili Piper, and one thing that we did really well was making sure to connect early with customers that would be there. And we kind of tried to treat it as a VIP experience of, hey, we saved you a spot at this dinner. We'd love you to join. And that way it's a really organic conversation from your prospect happens to be sitting next to a customer of yours. And we didn't really have to plan that out necessarily.
Mm.
Obviously, we controlled the seating chart a little bit, but it's more of an organic conversation of, hey, you happen to be at this event. We're going to be there too. Make sure you keep this night free for dinner. So just making sure that you have your customers speaking for you instead of kind of selling yourself at those events.
So basically you're putting on a small in-person dinner in a city,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're inviting prospects and customers, and now you're leveraging the source, the voice of customer themselves
Yeah,
to
it's a little meta,
essentially
but
have, yeah,
yeah.
have those organic conversations with prospects, and then like, deal flow could
Mm-hmm.
potentially materialize from that. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
so powerful. I would love to just double click on this because I think a lot of folks like they think this is out of reach and it's inaccessible. So I'm curious
I
from
hear that a
your,
lot. Yeah.
yeah, like from your perspective, your experience doing in-person events, like what does the effort look like in terms of putting something like this together?
That's a great question. Yeah, I hear that a lot. Even at my current role now, we do a lot of trade shows and events, but we don't do a lot of hosted dinners. And a lot of the concern is, oh, that's too expensive, or like, oh, that's out of budget. That's the first thing people say. But so one thing that I would definitely recommend is I would start out with a list of what events you're going to be at that year anyway. So the travel's already going to be paid for. Everyone's going to be in town. All your reps are there. Start with that and figure out who else you know at the event from the partnership angle. So usually, depending on the size of the event, when we were at Chili Piper, we would have several other partners at that same, like say we're in Boston for inbound. Everyone else in Martech is also in Boston for inbound that same week. So we would kind of handpick who we wanted to partner with. And you're essentially splitting the bill with your friends when you partner on an event like that. So what I really like about that is it's not just the cost of the dinner itself, but it's the cost of making sure you get the right people in the room. And if you partner with people that are selling to the same ICP as you have the same targets as them, then you're all incentivized to make sure it's a really great crowd that comes out. And it's not on you to bring in 30 people. It's on you to bring in maybe 10. And then you have two partners who also bring in 10 people.
Such a clutch tip for someone listening. I know it could be like as expensive as you want it to be, right? Depending on the
Mm-hmm.
venue. But if
Yeah.
you had to like give like a ballpark figure of what you've seen in your experience, just for someone listening to kind
Yeah,
of have a sense of what it is.
it varies a ton based on cities, honestly. So we used to have like I don't have the chart in front of me, but usually I would budget around 200-ish dollars a person, and then you can kind of go nuts from there, honestly, depending on the place. But that's a good baseline to start with. Yeah.
Love it.
And
All right.
yeah.
Oh, good.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and one thing that we do out here at Contact Monkey that we didn't do at Chili Piper is we also reach out to customers ahead of events because people in our ICP often don't have budget to attend a ton of events themselves every year. And we just say, hey, we're going to be at this event. Do you want an extra ticket to come for free.
Mm,
And we don't force them to come to dinner with us or anything. It's not like they have to do anything in return, but it's more of just a nice gesture like, hey, you're in this city, we're going to be there. So
I
you can even
see, I
start
see.
small like that. You don't have to start with a full fledged dinner. You can start with, let me pull a list of all my customers in this city. Obviously, you can use Clay and so many tools to do that now. So it's a little quicker
Hmm.
than it used to be. But you can see who's already in that city. That way, you're not paying for travel. You're just paying to get them into this event that they might not have had the budget for anyway.
That's super cool. So now you're just aggregating your customers at the event, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
a an easy next step because it's so much cheaper to just cover a ticket, right? Versus put a room at, 30 people at $200 a pop, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then if they want to come by and hang out at your booth for a bit, that's great. But obviously, there's no obligation to do that.
And you're tapping into a very powerful psychological principle. Shout out to the book Influence, reciprocity,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in just giving things when you obviously within reason, but and
of course.
giving things away that you can with no expectations, and things usually
Yeah,
come back around for you. Yeah.
for sure. All right, tip number 8.
All right. So similar theme, but tip number 8 is just finding different ways that you can make your customer have a really memorable experience. So again, not everyone can host a dinner, but another fun thing you can do is if you're going to take out, say, a billboard ad. This has been done a ton in B2B now, but at Chili Piper, when we did this, we decided to make our customers the star of it instead of ourselves. And it was really cool to see people's reactions, people taking selfies with a billboard. I think Gong and Marketo did this years ago too with, I forget what Marketo's awards were called. I don't know if you remember, but they used to take over San Francisco with those. And this is a tough one to scale, but you could also submit customers for awards and speaking opportunities too. So just looking for little ways like that to make them feel just really special. And again, it's kind of that
Hmm.
reciprocity thing where you're not asking them, like, you're not submitting them for something so they'll talk about you, but it's more of just, hey, we want to
Yeah,
recognize that you're doing a great job and we see you and we want to
I
celebrate
love that. The way I'm translating this selfishly, like for us at AdConversion,
you. Mm-hmm.
is like for us with our courses, the way I kind of think about it and visualize it is like each instructor is the celebrity, you know? And like essentially what
Yeah.
like my whole frame is like each instructor is a celebrity and my job is like I'm just the label, like I just want to give them as much distribution, as much
Mm-hmm.
like notoriety, as much like celebrity possible by having just been a part of like this label called AdConversion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like when you're saying these things around like creating memorable experiences, it's like looking at other industries.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like events is something that's very new for me. I've never really done many events
Mm-hmm.
personally. So like I'm just like asking people, I'm like, what are things you've done at events that like worked really
Mm-hmm.
well? Oh, and like tapping into LinkedIn and like getting feedback is super helpful.
Mm. Very cool.
All right. Tip number 9.
All right, number 9. So this one is kind of a catch-all, but it's essentially using everything we already talked about in your retargeting campaigns. So almost everything that we've talked about can be either screenshotted, you could capture those videos from Gong, like we were saying. You can take clips from speaking spots for your customers, but all of that can really be used in your retargeting. One thing that we tested a lot. I haven't gotten it going here at all yet, but at Chili Piper, we did YouTube pre-roll videos
Mm,
with a lot of our testimonials and customer stories. And there's so many different ways you can slice up customer stories if you have even just one video. At my current role, we actually literally just have one customer story video, and I've chopped it up and I'm running that on LinkedIn now to see how that performs. But you can start with one, see how it goes, scale from there. You don't have to have a huge library of video. I think a lot of people are intimidated to get video going. And that's, again, another thing that people say that it's so time consuming, it's so expensive, but just start with what you have and see
yeah,
what learnings you can get.
I love this. Have you noticed anything around like the difference of like video content as a testimonial versus images?
Yeah, we tried a ton of both at Chili Piper. I would say if you're looking for direct traffic to your website, video isn't always the best. But for something like longer play for like view through conversions, or if you're looking at other metrics like that, video for us always won out on that
Hmm.
front. But if you're looking to just drive people right to your website immediately, video usually isn't going to be the best ad format.
Yeah, yeah, I resonate with that as well. All right, I know we're coming up on time. I want to be respectful of your time. What is the 10th and final tip?
All right, last tip. So this one is a little bit meta, but it's actually running LinkedIn thought leader ads on your customers' accounts. Not
Mm,
every industry or person is going to be cool with this, so it really varies. But you can see a ton of good results from, again, this is a little meta of voice of the customer because it's literally their face and their account versus yours. But you can definitely get a lot out of it if, like, say someone was going to post something nice about your event or about something anyway, and then you reach out and ask. I know I saw Chili Piper's doing this with Chili Palooza right now. They had people go to the event and write a recap, and now they're promoting those as thought leader
mhm.
ads, which I thought was really cool. And so before this ad type was available, we actually used to just take screenshots of people saying nice stuff about us on LinkedIn, and I would run those as ads. But now you can actually put spend directly behind your customers' accounts, which I'm excited to play around with here. I haven't tested it yet.
It's such, I mean, that play is awesome. We're doing it right now with like testimonials. So our
Nice.
customers like shouted us out on LinkedIn, and then we took those and like we're pushing them as testimonials, and we're pushing them as testimonials to open opportunities right now.
Amazing.
So it's
Yeah.
like, who better to see, the voice of customer and like all this positive praise than people you're actually in a deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Tara, this was awesome. Just to do a quick recap for everyone watching right now. Tip number one is to spend time with your customers. Do it to the point of repetition where it starts to get boring and you really feel like you nailed it down. Tip number two is to use real customer results on your marketing materials and in your landing pages. Tip number three was to leverage tools like testimonial.io or other tools to aggregate the voice of customer at scale. The tip number four was to leverage in-app NPS, your CSMs, renewals, etc., as like touch points of when you can actually ask for that stuff. Tip number five was to set up alerts using call recording tools. So things like I love this tool is great, etc. Obviously, guys, like think for yourself on what are good things to track, but the key is to like have those alerts. Tip number six was to use customers instead of stock photos. Tip number seven was to leverage in-person dinners and events so that way you can really like, you have the source there in terms of the voice of the customer speaking with prospects. Tip number eight is to find ways to create memorable experiences so that you can just generate more VOC like organically. Tip number nine is to put all of that VOC, the voice of customer, in your retargeting. And then the 10th and final tip was to leverage thought leader ads from your customers as meta as it gets in your campaigns. Tara, thank you so much for being here. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Thanks so much. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post at least once a week, so please follow me to give me a little push.
Yes, everyone follow Tara. She's awesome. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you guys in the next one.